I'm Dr. Ashley.
And this is Sherry.
And this is From Her Point of View. We are back with another episode. And so we're going to talk about some of the topics that we haven't touched on yet, but that were absolutely necessary and imperative for us to go through. So with us today, we have Dr. Jeannelle Perkins-Muhammad, and she is going to assist us in this very important conversation. So, Dr. Perkins-Muhammad, please tell us about yourself.
Sure, you can call me Dr. Muhammad.
Okay, because I was wondering.
You get tongue-tied if you get to trying to say everything. But Dr. Jeannelle works for me. I'm perfectly fine with that. I have been a marriage and family therapist now for just under 20 years, actually just over 20 years. Wow. I started out in ministry, and what I found was that we have in our culture a tremendous ability to tap into the spiritual. And sometimes our tapping into the natural pulls us back a bit. And so I wanted to get a lot of that evidence-based theory to go along with the counseling that I was doing so that I could help my clients in the church and ministry really do some of those 1, 2, 3 steps to figuring out how to get to the next level. And so in marriage and family, what I do is I'm a systemic thinker. So I literally look at what brought you from childhood to today that puts you in the space where you feel a little bound. So I work with individuals, couples, families, because even as an individual, you walk through the doors with your mama, your daddy, your sister, your brother, your coworkers, all those people come in. So technically your family's there. My background, my PhD is in counseling, education, and supervision. So I actually teach at the Citadel here in Charleston, South Carolina, in the psychology department as well, and am in private practice. I love what I do, and I'm eager to talk about this subject because I see a lot of clients who don't even realize that this is what's impacting their relationships.
So what guided you into this field?
Honestly, my parents were ministers.
Okay.
And yeah, it was really not pastors, because people try to call me a PK all the time.
Define what the difference is for us.
So my parents actually worked under a pastor. So they would go out into various churches and communities, and they would teach on families. And particularly they ran our marriage excellence department. And they really emphasized the idea of bringing families together through Christ. And then, of course, working through the issues that are at hand. One of the things that I thought was really impactful was a premarital course that they put together for our church. And it dealt with everything from pull your credit score to pulling your financials to your medical report.
Things that nobody wants to talk about.
That's right.
But that are integral to a marriage. I mean,
absolutely.
We're becoming not one person, but we're coming together. So to hide your credit score, to hide your medical history, I mean, these are the things that I'm taking on.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, in some cases, even hiding children. And then you come to realize that there are these little people that exist. So it's really, really a matter of paying attention to what they were doing. They had a fantastic relationship. Of course, as children, you don't know everything that goes on in the background. So what you see in the forefront, you just like, okay, I like that. And then as time went on and I became an adult, they began, particularly my mother, began to teach me more about, hey, baby girl, here's some of the things you're going to run into in life. You won't see these on the outside, but you need to know more about it. And that really propelled me into thinking, I bet there are a lot of people out there who don't think like this. So with me, what you see is what you get. I love the Lord, but I'm going to tell you the truth too.
And that's exactly what we want. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So have you found that with your clients that most of them come from a Christian background, or does it make a difference?
It varies. It really does. More spiritual background, because not everybody nowadays identifies as Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And many people come to me because they actually think I'm Muslim, and I'm not.
Because of your last name?
I married the last name, right? So it's really interesting to watch as they discover that I'm not, but then to recognize that we all really have some of the same perspectives when it comes to just living. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not about religion, it's just about being a good person.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's not exactly something that I was thinking about talking about in this episode, but I think it's very important because spiritual background of people is so much a part of the fiber of their being. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can create, from my experience, it can sometimes create barriers in a relationship, and sometimes it can tear down walls in a relationship. So it's just really all about how you move in those spaces with your partner. So it's just interesting to me to think about, how you navigate that with your clients, bringing that spiritual aspect into the psychological background.
Absolutely.
That you have as well.
Well, I believe faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God, right?
Okay.
Well, I also believe that what you hear outside of the word is also something you're going to put your faith on. So as a couple, what you're saying to one another and how you relate to one another, you're going to have an opportunity to put your faith on what you desire to see. And sometimes we're working so hard at something that we don't even realize that what we're saying is very different from what we're doing. And so if we don't hear and stop and listen to what we're saying to one another and the self-talk that we're doing, before you know it, you destroy the whole thing.
That's a big one. I think sometimes we think, or you have that person talking to you, so of course you're taking in what they're saying, but then you're not really analyzing what you're saying to yourself. And that voice inside your head is so loud. It's so loud. I mean, it's the one you hear all the time. It's the one that's talking you out of doing things. It's the one that is, questioning your decisions all the time. That voice is loud. The voice is loud.
And when it's speaking inside, you're really thinking about those things day in and day out. So that ruminating thinking, like constantly going, is eventually going to come out of your mouth, because what you're thinking, you're getting into your heart, and out of the mouth, the heart speaks, right? So if that's the case, then the more you're thinking on things that are negative, things that are dysfunctional, how you're going to get your revenge, tit for tat, you're going to speak that eventually. And before you know it, you're going to walk it out. So that's your behavior. And then you're going to see some results. And you're thinking, oh my God, how did I get here? That's what was going on in the brain.
That voice. Yep. I know that trauma, we're talking about that voice in our head. But when the trauma affects so many different things, it'll affect that voice in our head. It resonates in our body, all of those things. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about trauma and how that impacts a person. And then we'll move on into how that affects, the physical and the relationship and everything like that.
Well, trauma is really interesting because there are a number of different kinds of trauma. And in particular, we're talking about sexual trauma.
Yes.
And so you talking about child molestation, rape, incest that takes place from time to time. There are individuals who have same gender trauma in sexual relationships, and pornography or non-consensual trauma. And in childhood, sometimes people think of trauma as being something that really physically impacts you. But there's also that opportunity that some young people have to see things in pornography that they shouldn't be seeing. That's trauma. It's going to impact them in one way or another. And so we have to think about trauma and its impact as the brain as a hand. So when you look at the brain as a hand, think of the thumb as being the amygdala. It's the second smallest gland in the brain, and it holds the emotions. Then you have the hippocampus. Your hippocampus holds the memories. Then you're going to look at your sigillant. That's all your thinking area, your introspection and reflection. Well, what trauma does is create an emotion and a memory all at the same time. And you can see that the memory is sitting on the largest part of the emotion. So when a trigger happens, sometimes small triggers, like just seeing something, then what begins to happen is the emotion and the memory begin to create what we call flipping out, right? Just poof. Suddenly you're cussing people out that you didn't intend to. You're screaming and hollering at individuals, or you're isolating and not wanting to be around someone. So you come to this place where you don't know what's happening, and it's all happening in the brain, how you're thinking. Remember that memory pressing on those emotions, and before long it just grows to a point where you can't handle it anymore.
So when that trauma, like bringing my hand out, so you start here and then goes all the way across and affects all of these other aspects of the brain. That's so amazing.
Your cognitive, your emotional, your spiritual, and your physical. Yeah.
It's deep, huh?
It is. It really is. And it makes sense in the way that it manifests in a person, because it didn't just stop here. It didn't just stop here. It goes across everything that affects you as a person. It's just all the way.
And then you begin to question, why was I chosen as a victim? What did I do that made me look like it was okay for someone to decide that they were going to violate me? It also shows up when people question their sexuality sometimes. Am I gay now because I've had sexual trauma, male on male or female on female? Oftentimes we think only or mostly of women being traumatized sexually. That's not true. Not true at all. It's just that men don't really talk about it. So we do two things to men. We say, shut up, stop that, let me give you something to cry about. So we cut out that emotion, right? And that's what they need to heal.
And that's traumatizing too. Yep.
It's very much so.
It is.
And then the other thing we do to them is we tell them, you have to be a man. Be a man. Well, what does that mean? And when you've been violated in your emotions, you're thinking about that memory. You can't do that full thought here. You can't do any introspection of self, nor can you do any reflection. So you either bottle it up and run away, which means that for all of us, we don't have that opportunity to create that emotional connection, or you're constantly angry because you've been betrayed, you've been exploited. Now there's secrecy. I can't tell anybody what's happened to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like it's almost like a domino effect. Like once it happens, if it's not addressed properly, you will find that you will continue to experience this emotion, this memory, this traumatic experience over and over and over and over again, and don't even realize it because you've never dealt with the initial act itself. Because you don't understand. A lot of people don't understand what trauma is. We are all being traumatized in different ways, whether it's from childhood, adulthood. Things happen to us that are traumatic. And we just look at it as, oh, it's just a problem. Or when it comes to the sexual, like you said, especially with childhood, I feel like a lot of children, I don't know what it is. It's kind of like it's like it's blocked out. Like so many things are happening in between time that they kind of put it in the back of their mind. So when they do go to have this adult consensual experience, they go back to that emotion, that memory, and don't even realize it, why they're responding in a negative way.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when that happens as an adult, you have the same reaction as you do as a child, because it's impacting the brain. We only think of the impact on the body, but it's not just the body. So with our children, we have an uptick in suicidality in the African American community. We tell them what goes on in this house stays in this house. It's the worst thing you can do. Why? Because if they are having a problem and the person hurting them is in the house, what on earth do you do? Where do you go? And then if you go to someone at school and they don't do anything because they're like, oh, hold on, we need to wait and find out if this is true. No, every child should be believed until it's proven false. Every adult should be believed until it's proven false. And so it's so important to recognize that there is trauma, as you said, in all kinds of areas of life. So one of the things that we do is an ACE study. And there are quite a few questions on an ACE study that range from, have you been in an abusive home where there was alcohol or drugs? Have you ever been sexually molested or touched in a way that you did not desire? Have you lived in actually construction areas, like all the gentrification that we see? Okay. Do you come from a home where you didn't have enough to eat? There are 10 items on this ACE study, and anything over 5 lets me know that you have a higher risk for depression, anxiety, potentially even diabetes, heart disease. The physical and the mental are so connected, and we don't think about that. In a heartbeat, we'll go and get help for a broken arm. But the minute we feel sad, we don't tell anybody about it. We feel sad for too long, we isolate, and people go, girl, you know, that's just her moodiness. No, we need to really check on one another, because not everything is just an attitude. Sometimes there's really a problem going on.
Society that hard. I mean, to not so much check on people, but like how she said, we just kind of bottle it up and just, oh, that's just how she is. But she's had to be that way for so long. She doesn't know any other way to be. And now she's stuck in this place, and everybody around her has accepted it. And no one said, hey, let me really go make sure she's okay. Is everything okay? You know, what's going on? I know that you get into this space every now and again, but are you really okay? Like, you got to almost double check, because it's easy to shield your emotions and to express it.
Then when you go and you ask her, or is she okay? What do you do with that information when she says, I'm not? Like, what is the next step? I'm not okay. Yeah, I can listen to you, but really, what else can I do? Or what else can I give you? Or how else can I guide you to the resources that you need to get the help that you need? You know,
that's a really good question, because I actually teach a class called Mental Health First Aid, and you can find one of these classes anywhere in the country. Just about every state has a instructor for mental health first aid. And so what we teach large groups here in Charleston, churches, judges, we've had counselors themselves get together, because every counselor is a little different. And what we do is to teach first aid like you would CPR. So who do you call? Who are the people? First of all, what do you look for? What are the signs? Now, we don't want you out there diagnosing people. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying, look for the signs that you see, and then ask the right questions. How can I help? Do you mind if I call? And then here's a list of a couple of people that you might call. Knowing when to leave someone alone and when not to. If someone tells you they're suicidal, you don't go call somebody. You might take them with you if you can, or you sit with them until you can get to a phone. We all have cell phones now, but you don't leave them alone, because the minute that you do, that could be that moment. And so it's important that you have resources calling the 800 numbers for suicidality, for sexual assault, for those individuals who are child protective services, etc. Having those national numbers available to you is just as important as having the local numbers available. And then recognizing that you're not telling people's business. You're actually saving someone's life. Because 1 in 5 in the US are living with a mental health disorder in a 12-month period. And 25% of them take it over into the next year. And here's this for our community. Check this out. The population of Houston, Chicago, and Philadelphia, that's the number of African Americans, the whole population in those 3 areas. Their whole populations equate to the number of African Americans in the US who are living with a mental health disorder that is diagnosed.
That is diagnosed, not undiagnosed.
That is diagnosed. That is not including our prison population. Hear me? That's not including the people who are homeless, because we can't actually do much in terms of actually getting those numbers. We can't access them. They're protected classes. So that's diagnosed. So you know there's far more. Far more. So when it comes to sexual trauma, you know then that's going to carry over into those diagnoses.
Absolutely.
Why are they depressed? Why are they experiencing tremendous anxiety and fear? What's happening in terms of diabetes? That's why our primary care physicians now are starting to give assessments to determine if there's anxiety and depression, because it's all very much connected.
You made a point that I want to go back to about sexual trauma and the same-sex situation. So I have read about and I've listened to some things, and just thinking about the trauma that happens, in sexual trauma that happens, and then a person physically responds to it, and then they don't know, that makes them confused, and they're like you had mentioned, like, oh, am I gay? Am I attracted to this person? And just thinking about how the mind and the body are connected. You experience that trauma, but then your body responded a different way. So that can be confusing.
Very much so.
And then you have that other element of, we're not going to talk about this and what happened here or whatever. We're not going to talk about. So let's talk about how we navigate that.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people believe that their body should not respond. And that's just not true. Sometimes it doesn't. It'll shut down. But in all actuality, most of the time, your body is responding to a natural stimulus, right? So men who get an erection cannot believe that that's what happened to them. But they would normally get an erection if that were the person they wanted to spend that kind of time with, right? It is just how the body responds. There's nothing you can do about it. And to believe that, or to not believe, I guess I should say, that you would have that reaction is really, I hate to say it's asinine. You cannot not have a reaction. Even women who, sometimes people will say, well, I feel like I got wet. Like, I feel like that happened. That's a natural reaction to the stimulus. But the trauma that happens in the brain, if you've ever had just sex with no intimacy, just sex, you'll have the same reaction. Intimacy, it would be a more pleasurable reaction. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense. And I'm hoping that everybody is picking up what we're putting down here, because sometimes you'll feel guilt because you responded to that. And I did not want that, but this is how my body responded to it. And then instead of, because we don't know that. We don't know that the connection is there with the mind and the body. So you're thinking, maybe I did want it, or maybe it is my fault, or maybe I triggered this in some, made this happen in some way. And I think that could be a part of the guilt that people carry into their consensual sexual relationships, or even the relationships. Yes, we're in a relationship and we are going to have a physical relationship. But in this particular instance, I may not want to do this. But then you're still feeling obligated that, maybe I made them feel like I did, or so I need to go ahead and do that. And, it all just trickles across.
It does.
It really does.
That's really a huge part of the healing process, because when you are fully connected to your emotions and your cognitive space, you're more able to say to someone, I don't want to do that. That's not what I'm doing today. And anyone who would pressure you to do something you don't want to do, you don't want to be bothered with anyway. Everything from pressuring you to buy designer bags, because, if you're going to be my man, you need to be buying me these bags, right? And you can't afford it. I'm sorry, another show. So
it is a part of this show. Okay, go ahead.
All the way to literally, I want sex tonight and you're going to give it to me no matter what. That's not appropriate. And that's not an individual you want to be with. Some of the things that begin to happen for people when they're in those relationships is that they have a huge fear of abandonment. They have trouble asking someone to help them out, telling someone that they feel like they're being pressured or abused. And then not only that, but there's that feeling of worthlessness that comes because you're being made to do something, even in a marital relationship.
That was a question to you. How do we have married couples that listen to the show? And the reason why we're talking about all things sex is because even in the marriage, like they're struggling and they don't know why. But how do you navigate through? Because growing up in the church and everything, you're taught that, you give to your husband. That's your husband. You're married to him. When he wants it, you give it to him. Even if you don't want to. And in older generations, households, they would tell, like my mom's generation, they would say, hey, it's your husband. If he wants it, you give it to him. Because if you don't, somebody else will. So now in your mind, you're thinking like, whether I want to do this act or not, I have to because he's my husband. And if I don't, he has the opportunity to go out and get it from somebody else, which leads into, let's just say that he does go out and get it from somebody else. Now you're experiencing infidelity and guilt because you feel like you weren't giving it to him enough. Right. So he went out and did it with somebody else. So I think a lot of married couples don't know how to handle that question of, is it enough? Is it okay if I say no tonight?
Intimacy. If you don't have intimacy, look deeper beyond the physical. I'll go back. Cognitive, emotional, spiritual, and physical. You see physicals at the end, right?
You got to get through all these other things first.
Baby, boom. I'm trying to tell you, if for whatever reason you're not being intimate throughout the course of the day, it's really difficult to get to the end of the day. And I'm going to venture to say women want it too. They do. Oh, we want to have it sometimes more than the men do. I remember my pastor one time telling a story where a man came to him and said, I don't know what to do. My husband or my wife continually wants to have sex and it's like too much and I can't handle it. And he said, oh, let me tell you something. Don't you ever tell another man that again in your life. I will help you, but don't you ever tell another man that. Because most men are having the opposite. But the reason they are is because they're not being intimate throughout the course of the day. So when you communicate with one another, which is a matter of listening to understand, not listening to respond. I'll say that again.
Go ahead,
listening to understand, not listening to respond, because understanding does not mean agreement. Okay. So when you're communicating at that level, when it comes to intimacy, you're going to find that woman want to give you what you want every day of the week because you're paying attention to her needs. You're hearing that she needs you to take care of the kids' baths tonight so she can go ahead and help get the kitchen cleaned up. You're listening to the fact that she said, I really want to see that movie. So you go get the tickets and set the date and make sure the kids have somebody to stay with. Or instead of babysitting your children.
Why do they call it that? They're your children. You cannot babysit your own children.
I'm just saying. Instead of babysitting your children, actually say to her, hey, I got the kids for the weekend. You go ahead and do what you need to do. And you know what? Here's the thing. Let's say you don't know how to handle the kids for the weekend. There are all kinds of people in your family who can help you. Stop tripping. Stop acting like you don't know what to do. So you're right. We are taught that we should enjoy sex in marriage, in a ministry setting, right? That's what we're taught. It's better to marry than to burn. Heard that many times, right? So if we're going to enjoy it, we need to know what God says about it. So one of the things I love to do is to take couples in premarital to Song of Solomon, because a lot of couples don't realize that once they're healed from some of the other things that are going on with the trauma and so forth, that there are ways of bringing themselves into a space of pleasure. And if you don't think that that's possible biblically, you'd be like, oh, we can't do that. Oh no, we're not doing that. Well, in the Song of Solomon, And I'm gonna have to find the scripture reference.
I can go along. I mean, I have the Bible app on here.
Okay, there we go. So I believe that it's in the 3rd chapter. And so there is a moment where she is kneeled before him and she takes his fruit into her mouth. Now, I know people go, cunnilingus is not of God. I'm sorry, I don't know how she kneeled before him and took his fruit, because when I picture the fruit she took,
yeah,
it exists. It's right there. We skip it because we want to call everything perverted. Everything perverted. But I'm sorry, that's not perverted. And guess what? Missionary position is not the only position that is of God.
Yep.
What you agree to as a couple is what you get to do.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
What
is the reasoning behind that?
Is it a form of submission?
I mean, the reasoning behind the condemnation of cunnilingus or fellatio or any of that. I mean, is that a misinterpretation of scripture? Or
I think to some degree it is. And when you really look back in the Bible and you begin to, it's escaping me who it was actually. It'll come to me. But anyway, he left Abraham. Tell me who I'm talking about. He left Abraham. He went and had his own city. And when he was in the city, the Lord told him to leave. His wife looked back and turned to salt. Lot. Thank you. Couldn't grab it for anything. So that's really where it comes from. Because in that book of the Bible, what happened was that they talked extensively about the fact that there were men loving men and women loving women. And when you see that movie, you get a very clear depiction of what that is. So oftentimes the only way cunnilingus can be seen, oral sex, y'all, can be seen by other, just because, by other people, is because you are of the same gender. And there's no reason otherwise that you would do that if you were a heterosexual couple.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
That's the thinking, is that why would you do that? Well, because it's pleasurable. And God made every orifice of our body for pleasure. Every orifice of our body for pleasure. And if you understand how to pleasure yourself first, women, you can then teach men how to pleasure you in those spaces. We don't have to run from it. Now, I'm not saying you got to go out here and tell all your girlfriends and everybody about it, although you should have a really good girlfriend you can talk to about it, for sure. Yet, that piece where you get to teach him, you have to be real careful about, because that's his ego.
So having explored what's going on with cunnilingus and fellatio, then you have the aspect, like you just said, about exploring by yourself. There's an element of condemnation of that as well. So let's talk about what's underlying there.
Same stuff.
Okay.
All comes from the same place.
Okay.
I mean, when you stop and really think about it, a lot of the time the interpretation you get is based on the church that you're in.
Okay.
Right? So if the pastors of that church had significant difficulty in their lives with something, then they're going to lean a little more towards saying, don't do that, right? But if they have a very well processed life, childhood, young adulthood, etc., then that emotionality that's connected to those things that did hurt them would then be lessened, reprocessed. Like, I do EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it reprocesses memories, right? Doesn't take them away. Ain't nobody hypnotizing nobody. Okay. Put that out there. That's not what that is. But it reprocesses memories so that the emotionality connected to it isn't impacting your relationships day by day. And so what happens with the idea of touching oneself, masturbation, is that most people think that's wrong. But how will you know what feels good if you don't figure it out? how are you going to know how to tell someone how to pleasure you if you don't know how to pleasure you? I meet women in their 50s and 60s who have never had an orgasm. I want to hug them.
You do. I understand that. Yeah, you do. Because if we're having, by the time you're 50 or 60 years old, do you know how many sexual interactions you will probably have had by then?
Mm-hmm.
And to have never experienced the pleasure. Mm-hmm. And let's come to it from faith. The God-given pleasure, the creation of our bodies, some of the things that we have are simply for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And to never experience pleasure is really sad.
Yeah. When you think about it, though, the reason that we don't get that opportunity is because we go back to the idea that men are taught not to have that deep emotional connection because they can't express their own, right? So when we consider how they are emotionally connecting in sex, in the barbershop, they hear, bring the hammer. You know, you got to go out there and get your bodies. I'll be honest, when the teens came in here telling me about the bodies they were getting, I was like, who are you killing? I did not realize that the bodies were the number of people they were sleeping with. It took me a minute. My daughters had to they were like, Ma, don't say things like that. Like, I didn't know.
We're always learning.
We are. And I'm grateful. So when we think about the fact that they dismiss and disconnect from the emotionality of having pleasure, they're looking for theirs only. In most cases, you'll find every now and again that there's a man here or there who says, you know what, I'm looking for your pleasure. I want to see what's happening for you. I think about it like this. When I first learned to kiss, I'm going to tell my age, I learned on a Billy D. Williams poster.
Oh, Billy.
Now, my parents weren't super wealthy, so I knew this poster needed to last for me. So my kiss was quite dry. Mm-hmm. When I met my husband, he's from Chicago. He went to give me a kiss. And I've asked for permission to say this. Let me say that first. I felt like I had been kissed from the eyebrow to under the chin. I felt like a Saint Bernard had come and kissed me. And I thought, Jesus, I like him. But
this is not like how I practice.
No, what is this? Now, I thought about that for a few days, actually, before we had a conversation about it. And I realized, because of the parents I have, that someone somewhere decided not to tell him that didn't work for them. Now, I knew at that age, he had kissed a number of people. And there were women out there who did not tell that man that was a sloppy, wet bread. You know how that is. Don't do that again. So on a car ride that was super peaceful with a conversation about something altogether different, I said, I was thinking, and I brought it up, and he worked on it. Without another conversation, he worked on it. That's what it takes to get the men to the place where they go, oh, I need to connect here so that you can have the pleasure I'm having. Because your 5 minutes and then, oh, baby, that was good. Most women do not have an orgasm from intercourse, vaginal intercourse. All the pleasure tentacles, if you will, are all on the outside. Mm-hmm. So he needs to learn how to work that.
So women, if you haven't been listening, you need to be honest with your spouse and your partner and let them know how you feel, what works and what doesn't work. Because a lot of women will just take what's given to them and won't say a word about it. And they're not happy with what they have. And it's because the mate doesn't really know what they want. So you have to open.
And here's the other piece to that. If he's like, I'm not giving it to you,
he ain't it. Bye. You gotta go.
Because there are other areas. Trust me, if he's not giving it to you in the bedroom, because most men want to know their woman is satisfied. When I lead her, my woman, right? So if he's like, I don't know about that. You might need to trade it in. And I'm a marriage and family therapist, but I'm real. That's real.
That goes back to that communication piece you mentioned earlier. You have to, closed mouths do not get fed. Okay?
On no day.
So you need to say what needs to take place. If somebody is licking you from your forehead to your chin, and you don't like it, and you don't say anything, and nobody before has ever said anything, how does he know? You're still around. You're still sticking around. You're still letting them lick you from your forehead to your chin.
But think about the experience. That if she would have never said anything to her husband about it, and
her face would be chafed.
Wait, not only that, but that could have been a traumatic experience for her that she would have to continue to relive in that relationship because she's never said anything about what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And just because you've also been told, you need to give him what he wants. Mm-hmm. You need to do what, you need to render your due.
Mm-hmm. Well, husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. I'm just saying, we could put some ... wherever you want. Ellipsicize that.
Look, I told y'all we were going to cover all the things. Okay, so we're going to cover all the facets of this. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to deeply respect you, but you're going to have to, as Sherry would say, love us down.
Love us down.
Right?
But these conversations are important because it sets the tone. It says that it's okay to talk about these things with your friends, with your spouse, with, someone
your kids,
with your children, especially.
That's another conversation that needs to be had.
Speaking of children, I was talking to a friend of mine and he has daughters. And he was just like, I don't even know how we got on the topic, but he said, I try to be honest with my girls and tell them what's up. Cause he's like a street dad, like really rough, but loving. And he said, I just try to be honest with them. And I'm like, that's great. And he said, but I open the door for them to come and talk to me, but I feel like they won't come talk to me. And I said, well, why? And he said, because I'm that dad. I'm going to go find the little boy who did what he did, and it's going to be over. And I said, oh, okay. But still leave that line of communication open. Still be honest with your children. But my question would have been, well, how honest are you with them? Like, what is it that you're saying to them? Because your tone in that conversation with your child will determine whether or not they come talk to you about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important that the doors of communication are open for sure, and that it's age appropriate, because that's really important. The tone has to be at their pace and how they're coming to you and how they're speaking about it. Most kids nowadays are coming early because we have young ladies getting their periods in like 3rd grade. So you really have to start having the conversation earlier than you thought you would. And it's about being able to say, I'm here if you need to talk. And usually you'll find that talk starts with, my girlfriend the other day said, right? Or this guy in our gym class was talking and he said, that's how it's going to start out. And you listen, if you judge it, they will not come back. If you tell them, oh, he shouldn't, she should, they're not going to bring their stuff to you because you did that for the friend. If you listen and have a girlfriend or a spouse you can take it to later, oh Lord, you know what she said today? Okay, we got to talk about this because I got to get this out. That's the best place to do that. Lead them and guide them in the way they should go, for sure. But you definitely got to let them set the pace and the tone. My girls would probably say that when they got to be teenagers, I might have said a little too much, but I did it on purpose because we lived in a time where they were coming into cell phones like crazy. And that's all the stuff we didn't have. I had a brick. My mom and daddy had a brick in the car. So there was
in the little Velcro bag.
Yes. And you had to go to the trunk to get it because they had a small car. That's how big that thing was. So when I thought about what I saw happening, I said, I have to pick up the pace. Plus, you know how smart your kids are, and every child's different. You can't treat them all the same. This might not be a group conversation. This might be individual conversation. And it's important to make sure that women know they should be pleasured. If he's not getting it right and he's not willing to, then you have to do something different. Now, I'm not for unprotected sex by any stretch of the imagination. You have to protect yourself and don't count on him to do it. What I'm talking about is literally being able to say, I know my body. I know what I like. I don't have any further emotional damage or trauma behind it. I've chosen the right partner, and now I'm ready. Let me show you how to take care of me. Now you show me. If you took a day together and said, let's show each other some things. Let's see who comes first.
Yeah.
Give a gift.
Have a gift exchange.
I'm saying. So I think it's just important. It's important to make sure that our young people are aware of what is appropriate touch and when it's appropriate, which is only consensual, and that they are then allowed the opportunity to have the conversation about what felt right and what didn't. And then how do I change it? What can I do? Because I don't like the way this is going. How do I have that conversation? And then be open. The minute you judge it, you're done.
Mm-hmm. They're not going to come back to you again.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm. That's a lot to think about.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, especially with having the conversations and how to react as parents, because parents, they do the best they can. They really do the best they can with what they have at the time. That's why you need to go out and get other things, because what you have at the time may not be what your child needs. And what was done for you, you know it didn't work, but you're doing it, because that's all you have. And like you said, each child is different. They're going to need something different. With my children are very different. And my son is more expressive than my daughter. So they'll have their conversations together. And then my son will be the one to come to me and say, this or that. And then when I talk to them, they'll both be there, but he's the mouthpiece. And then when it's over, he'll say, I told you we could ask her. You just have to just leave the door open, because just being receptive and able to have them to come into a safe space to talk to me about anything. I think as children, some parents, I'll talk from my experience. My mother said, you can come to me, you can talk to me about anything. That was what was said. But as a child, you know your parent, you know what they can handle, you know what they cannot handle. And so you don't necessarily come to them with everything. And with my son, with him being able to say that, I told you we could come and we could ask her whatever. And that just made me feel good, because that space that I've offered to you is really open. And it's just a trust thing. And like we mentioned before earlier in the episode, the communication, it's not just to respond. When you're listening to respond, you're not listening to what the person is saying. You're already crafting your response in your head. So you're not taking in what they're telling you. You're getting ready to have your rebuttal. And so when you're having that communication, sometimes there's silence at the end of it, because you need to process. That's why you got 2 ears, 1 mouth. You need to hear what's being said to you. And that's so important in so many different aspects of a relationship. And in this particular context of a physical, sexual relationship, to be able to have that conversation, make sure you understand and receive what I'm telling you. Repeat it back to me. Let me know that you know what I'm saying. If it's unclear, I can say it over again, and vice versa. Just really clear, really consensual, really understanding what I need from you and what I'm willing to do for you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I have a question. So I know a few people, and I guess it concerns me, overly exposing their children. Like that is their way of guiding them into what to do and what not to do, is by overly exposing them to the elements of sex at a young age. So the child is seeing you engage in certain acts. And I don't mean like, oh, hugging and kissing. Like a lot of couples don't even kiss in front of their children because it's like, oh, it's too much. But I'm not talking about the hugging and the kissing. I'm talking about all the other stuff that you could possibly be doing. And your child is being exposed to that as if it's normal. And so they're learning through your behavior of what it is that you're doing with your spouse or mate or whoever you're with. And then when they ask you about it, it's kind of just like, well, you know, X, Y, and Z, don't do this or don't do that or whatever the case may be. But I feel like there's trauma in that as a child because you didn't ask for it. You don't enjoy it, but you're subject to it. And so you have to kind of take that in. And then the parent, and I'm not downing any parent that does it, but I think it's important to be mindful of what it is that you're showing your children, because they're taking that as an example as well. So what would you say to people who, and the people who do it know who they are, who do that? Because I don't feel like it's done on purpose. I just feel like Dr. Ashley said, you're raised a certain way. So you know, that was taught to you that way. So you kind of just throw it onto your children that way because you just take down what was given to you. You don't have any other resources. Like, what else can you do or not do in that situation?
Well, first, let me say that anything that's beyond a hug or a gentle kiss that you would do in public with other people around, that's going to be considered child abuse. Any agency that walks in those doors and hears a child say that they have seen their parents have sex, and I'm not talking about the accidental, you left the door unlocked and they walked in, you jumped up, oh my goodness. I'm talking they've seen it. They've seen you fondle one another. They have watched that. You have encouraged them to watch it. That's child abuse. Period. The end. That's not a conversation of let's curtail it. Those children have now been abused. I would report that. I'm mandated to report that. That is completely unhealthy. And it's another part of sexual trauma. It's right in line with it. That child is going to have issues moving forward. They're not going to know what boundaries really look like.
I was going to say they're going to accept the behavior even if they're uncomfortable with it because they saw that you accepted it, even if you didn't want to at the time.
Yes. And they're going to display it somewhere. I had a client who brought her child in because she was performing oral sex on the little boys at school in kindergarten. Well, where'd she get that from?
Right.
Well, she actually saw it a few different times in a few different places that her mother was leaving her to be babysat. So she thought that was normal behavior because the people around her did not care that she was there.
And a child doesn't know how to process what that is and what is happening in this moment.
They don't have the brain development for it.
Nope.
Not at all. And as a matter of fact, that's why, and I pray that a number of the states that are trying to change it, we still have the age of consent is 18 in most states, 16 in some places, but still the brain development hasn't occurred where you have the ability to have a consensual sexual relationship, and certainly not with an adult. Oh, no, ma'am. That is a reportable offense. Not appropriate at all.
This is a good conversation. I think this is probably
I'm enjoying
the quietest I've ever been in all of our episodes. Because I'm so intrigued. Like I have, like as we're talking, I have like a ball of emotions, and I have so much that I want to say, but I am here to listen because I need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I want to respond, but I feel like in the midst of sexual trauma, because I've experienced it myself on different occasions, like I need to listen to what's being said.
Mm-hmm. Healing is so important. Those, when we say hurt people, of course it's true. We wouldn't say it, right? The healing process is so important to being able to move forward in life as a whole. And therapy is going to be the first thing I'm going to tell people to do. First, to get motivated to the point where you want to have therapy. And then as you're going through therapy, like the EMDR that I talked about a minute ago, then you have the opportunity to really recognize, because many don't, that they were traumatized in their childhood or in their young adulthood. Because like you said, they question, did I ask for it? Did I want it? Did I like it?
Mm-hmm.
I've had children or adults in my therapy room whose parents took them to places because they believed their healing was with a person, and that person sexually assaulted them. And beyond sexually assaulting them, made them learn how to squeeze his semen from their vaginal area so that he could then take it and go create ruse or create in order to cure them of things. And you stop and think about the damage that has done to a child. And here they are in their 40s and 50s, unable to have healthy, meaningful, emotionally connected relationships. And they're saying, what's wrong with me? No, it's not what's wrong with you. Let's get this healing done for how you were violated. It's what's wrong with them. They did this to you. And that has happened more times than I care to even think about. Where parents take their children to places thinking that it's going to be beneficial to them. I can't wrap my mind around it. They do, because they, again, believe. And that's another level of spirituality. For them, there's a spiritual component that's in there. Now, I'm not battling the spiritual component. That's not my job. I don't fight with Jesus or any other religious God. I don't fight with them. What I do is to work to help people heal from the trauma and the violations, the emotional disconnects that exist. I help them heal, forgive themselves, which a lot of people go, what? Forgive themselves, and then to forgive the other person. Because understanding what forgiveness really is the biggest challenge for most people. They think they're just supposed to be able to say, oh, I forgive you, and then the person comes back around and continues to do whatever they do. Or, oh, I forgive you, and every time they see the person, they shouldn't have any kind of feeling. Oh, no. It's being able to be compassionate enough, not only for yourself, but for the person that you don't walk around wishing ill for them, because it frees you up. That's mental space you could be using for other things. Forgiveness means that you're literally taking the time to look at what happened to you and recognize it wasn't your fault and not condone it, because many people don't realize that it was a problem. It became so natural in their households. It's a norm. So forgiveness of self, and then because of that guilt and shame that we talked about earlier, and then forgiving the other person who violated you, harmed you in one way or another.
I made a video about that in March, about how forgiveness is really for you. Yeah, you forgive the person, but that's so you can process those feelings and release that heaviness that you're carrying around with you. It takes a lot more energy to hold guilt and to hold anger and to hold all of those ill feelings you feel toward that person than to let it go and move on and work on refilling yourself with positivity and working through your trauma and all of those types of things. It's really for you.
It really does. And I would beg to say that many of the people who hold unforgiveness also have physical illnesses.
It's the connection again.
They wouldn't say that, but I know that there are many people walking around in unforgiveness and they have diabetes. Guess why? Because they're eating in order to cope, or their sweet tooth makes them not have to think about it, because I used to have ice cream afterwards and it felt good. And they don't know that that's connected to the trauma. Mm-hmm. They don't even realize it in many cases. So it's so important to recognize that there are these emotional bruises that happen with trauma that are not like the trauma that we think of, where you see someone who's had a limb amputated or someone who's literally got a black eye, things of that nature. We're talking about the hidden trauma that has emotional bruising. And if you were to walk up and touch that emotion, it would be the same as if you touch someone's broken arm. Mm-hmm. Same pain.
That mind-body connection. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So thinking about that, someone who's experienced trauma, when they recognize it, because sometimes, like you said, they don't even recognize it, where do they start? Where do they start to begin that healing process?
That recognition is so important. And it could be that someone around them says, I think you have something else going on. I'm not real sure, but maybe you might consider therapy. And I know in our community, it's becoming more prevalent, thank God. Mm-hmm. But it used to be that, again, that goes back to what happens in here stays in here type thing. We should actually sue Las Vegas, because we came up with that first. As a community, there's our reparations right there. So at the end of realizing that there's this space that you have to heal from, it means getting with a therapist who you can trust, whether that's in the church or someone that you really see that, for us, looks like us. So they might talk like us. Now, that doesn't mean we're monolithic by any stretch of the imagination, but it does mean that oftentimes there are things we don't have to explain because we get it, you know. I was with a couple today and they made the comment about, he'll say, well, whatever you want to do. And I said, oh, like, that's all I said. Right? And they cracked up because we all know Coming to America.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's what the fuck you like.
Right. So I didn't have to explain it. That's what it's like to be in the therapy room with someone who's culturally competent. Not that person makes the assumptions that we're the same, because where I need to ask questions, I'll ask questions. But there are these connections we make so that the healing process becomes a little more organic. It's not forced. And it actually happens faster. Absolutely. So then it's a matter of processing those triggers and so forth, getting to a place where safety exists. Emotional safety for yourself and for those around you, because those are the people you're taking this out on. So safety now exists. And then you're choosing the right partner. I talked about that with the kids and stuff. But when there's sexual trauma, you really have to start looking at who are the people you're bringing in your sphere. This is your sphere of influence. Why are they here? Why are you bringing? What are the red flags? Shoot, before we get to red, can we talk about yellow? Can we call it orange? What color you want? Because some of those things are small and you see them and you go, oh, it'll be okay. But he's sweet any other day. But today, let's talk about that one. Be present with that so that you choose the right partner. And then before you have sex with that partner, get to know your body. Don't just let them enter you how they want to enter you. Don't just let them flirt with you how they want to flirt with you. Some of this punching, flirting, that's not cute. Don't hit me. That's not cute. Now, if you're into BDSM, that's a whole nother level, another show. But train them in what works for you. Because if they're going to stay around, then you want to make sure they understand you. And then kissing. Start slow. Flirt, kiss, cunnilingus before you even reach penetration. We don't have to go right there. It might take weeks before you get there. But you need to know yourself after you've done that emotional healing so that you can be able to experience fully and in a relaxed environment that sexual experience the way it should have been maybe your first time or that time when you were in college or whatever that was when you were violated. It's a slow process. It's not something that happens overnight. Those emotions you have to get in check, though.
It's slow, but just listening to the process is really empowering. It's really empowering to be able to have and take control over your pleasure and your relationship. And like you said, just we can pace this. It doesn't have to happen all right now. We need to get to know each other. We need to explore these things. It's really empowering to be able to control the ebb and flow of what's happening here and knowing that you have that right and that's okay. And you don't have to give all of these things right now. It's okay.
You belong to you.
You belong to you.
First and foremost, you belong to you. You choose to give yourself to another. That is your choice. And how you feel about it is your choice. No one can make you feel a particular way. You can choose how you feel, and they can contribute to your feeling. But they don't make you feel a thing. That's too much power.
Right. Take your
I
power
give somebody
back.
that kind of power. You made me feel what? Boy, bye.
I guided you here. What you got, Sherry?
Oh, I was going to say to our older audience, if women, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but older audience, like she said, there's women in their 50s who haven't had an orgasm. I just wanted to say to those women that it's not too late. You can make this happen.
Absolutely. And it's so important. Do you know that there are so many endorphins and positive chemicals released in the body when you have an orgasm? You know that high that you feel? See, I can't say that.
Why not?
That's better than weed.
It's an open forum. You can say whatever you like.
It's better than weed. I mean, I don't do other stuff, but my daughter introduced me a couple of months ago. It was hilarious. That could be another story. But it was.
But if you
funny.
think about your happiest moment in life where you were just on a complete high, it's better than that. Let's just say that.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It is probably even more empowering to really feel it and be present with it. And then know you can do it again, because we can do multiples. We'd be like, dude, come on, get it up, let's go. That was only 2. I need 4. So
I mean, how beautifully and wonderfully we are made to be able to do this,
aren't we?
It's a blessing. It's a blessing and a gift, and to have missed out on that, like you said, is not too late. It's not too late.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that you need to get a mirror, a really great mirror, one that has both the magnifying side and the regular side, and just take a look. See how great you are.
We had somebody on a few weeks ago, and that's what she said. She's like, just look at it, because I mean, you want somebody else to look at it and you don't even know what it looks like.
You have to see it. It's beautiful. It's an incredibly created part of your body. And men should do it too. Look at themselves. They have spaces down there they like to have touch that they don't want to tell nobody about. They do. And it doesn't mean that they're gay.
That's another one. That's another one.
Stop. You were created for pleasure. There's a song, isn't it? And for my pleasure you were created. Thou hast created all things. Aren't you part of all things?
You're just putting unnecessary walls up.
Lots of stress and distress that people are having. I think the other thing too is that sometimes, because we're not talking about it, when it comes to our health, like our sexual health, and we go to a doctor, We don't ask the right questions.
Okay.
One, we sometimes don't have physicians who appreciate the Black culture and how we function. But if you ask the right questions, you'll have your doctor tell you how you can have anal sex properly. They will talk to you about it if you ask, because there are some things you don't want to be doing. Mm-hmm. If you go in and talk to them properly, they'll talk to you about how to not get a condom lost in your vagina and not know it. Mm-hmm. These are conversations to have. Mm-hmm. Learn how to use your Kegels, not just so you don't pee on yourself when you get older. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Teach that man that he can help you learn. See, the reason that size doesn't matter is because we have so much control. Mm-hmm. When we use the Kegels right, you can feel what you want to feel. Mm-hmm. Plus, I said earlier that it's not about penetration, because all of our goodies are on the outside, right? So when people walk around talking about, yeah, I got the big, but you don't know what to do with it. You got all this great big old huge that you can't use. What am I do with that? You don't even know what to do with it.
But let's talk about it. And then we can, and no, that's what I'm saying. You don't know, you may not know what to do with it now, but we're going to have a conversation, you know?
Yes, I'm going to help you.
And you're going to listen, not to respond, but to understand.
Well, wait, you're going to understand and then you're going to respond, because we're going to practice.
There you go. All right.
Absolutely. It's so important to understand that sexual health is a huge part of mental and emotional health, a huge part of it. And if you're not paying close enough attention, you will find you're not having sex when you are stressed and struggling emotionally and mentally. And when do you need to be having it? In those times. You need to pull out the KY and the whoever and say, you know what? I get that I'm not feeling great, but if you could just help me out tonight. If a woman said that to a man who knows what he's doing, not just who knows what he's doing, oh my word. In a heartbeat, she's
all the medicine she needs.
Not just knows what he's doing, but it's connected to that woman in a way, because he may know what he's doing, but if he doesn't have that tie to her, he doesn't care if it's going to help her or if it's going to make her feel better.
Emotional, spiritual, then physical.
Right.
Absolutely. Got to be connected across the board. Into me, see. The best medicine for a headache is some good lovemaking. You got to be able to relax well enough.
And that's when people are like, oh, I have a headache. But that means let's go.
I got an aspirin for you. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is great. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying myself.
Yes.
You got anything else on your notes, Cher?
No, but I have notes, great ones, as a follow-up. Yes. So because we're not pressed for time, because we could talk to you all night.
Look, I'm just now looking at the time.
Yeah, right. It's been an hour, 18 minutes.
I know, and we want to respect your time. So we want to know, or for our listeners, although you're in North Carolina, and I think South Carolina, my apologies, South Carolina. This was another epic conversation. How can people get in contact with you if they need to, or they have questions, or what sites are available? Because your site is very user-friendly, and I appreciate that. I went on there, I went through all your tabs, I read all of your stuff. I got a chance to get to know you before actually wanting to schedule an appointment. I actually want to schedule an appointment, but I was like, okay. So for everybody else, give them your information so that if they want to reach out, or, can reach out, how can they do that?
So I'm tmi.counselingandcoaching.com. TMI, the Marriage Institute, is what that stands for. TMI counselingandcoaching.com. And then on Instagram, I'm tmi.drjeannelle. So tmi.drjeannelle. tmi.drjeannelle. And I'm not really on Facebook and stuff because I'm a therapist. So so it's really important to, keep that part of my life a little more private. We do a number of marriage retreats and women's empowerment retreats in our cabin up in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And so it's really important that people have an opportunity to get away with friends. Sometimes people will come as a group of 3 couples or what have you. Or if they decide that they want to do an individual session, we still do the same 4-day setup for the retreat. And it's important to do that because we do workshops where you literally have to talk to one another for certain outcomes. And if you don't meet the outcomes, then you get to sit and talk with me a little longer. And most people don't want to do that. They want to get the work done because I tell the truth. And they know that. What you see is what you get. I'm not kidding you. I'm probably worse than this in other settings.
Worse? Why would you say worse?
Well, more. I get the opportunity to be more authentic, right? When it's not a professional setting. When I'm in a professional setting, I do try to hold back a little bit. When I'm with others and friends and people at the retreat, they get it all. So being bashful by the end of a retreat, you're nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. So it's important to get away and do those types of things because there's no distraction. I'm literally at the top of a mountain, 3,000 feet above sea level. And there's nothing but us in the trees in this beautiful cabin. And we enjoy it. We literally enjoy one another for that whole 4-day weekend. So that's a really great way to do that. And then also calling my office, 843-872-6411. I have to think about that.
And it will all be in the description. So if you didn't pick it up in this recording or this episode, you can pick it up in the description of the episode.
Excellent. So those are the ways to get in touch with me. I have a staff where we have a psychiatrist on staff. Their information is not yet up on our site, but we have a psychiatrist, a child therapist on staff, and an addiction therapist coming later this year. And we're not all in the same office. We work remotely and whatnot, but that's because we want to be able to touch so many people. I'm licensed in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and North Carolina. And it's important that we're all licensed like that because we don't have truly a national certification or licensure at this point. People are doing something different because of COVID, but that's still taking quite a bit of time. So those are the places where people can find me. And I think it's really important to find someone who connects with you. That's going to be vital. And you're going to find that even when we're talking about sexual health, there's so many other things that come into play. And to make you well-rounded and emotionally intelligent, as well as emotionally stable, is so important. I learn from my clients as much as they're learning from me. Because my mother always said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you find another room. You always need to be learning. So I don't walk in saying, I know everything. I walk in looking for your strength so you can teach me how to help pull it out.
Like I said, we can talk to you all night long because this is
and I could keep it going too.
You've been listening to From Her Point of View, the show curated specifically for women by women, covering a wide range of topics. Though this is From Her Point of View, we want your point of view too. Become a part of the show. Questions, comments, and feedback are welcome through Instagram and Facebook, where we post regularly. Email us at fromherpointofviewllc@gmail.com. Leave us a voicemail at 443-507-8032. Tune in weekly, and please share with your family and friends, as we can be found on your favorite platforms: Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Thank you for listening to From Her Point of View.